Hello and welcome to UnHerd. I'm Freddie Sayers. A crypto exchange is a platform for trading cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. The second largest of them is called Kraken. It's valued at over $10 billion, and its founder and CEO, Jesse Powell, has been in the news a whole lot in the last few days. First of all, he put out a memorandum for his employees about the kind of culture he wants at Kraken, which got quite a few people upset, including, apparently, the New York Times. Second of all, cryptocurrencies, as you might have heard, have crashed to lows not seen for years, down more than 2/3 from their recent highs. That all happened in the last few days. So clearly, if we want to understand the politics of crypto and what's actually going on, Jesse is the perfect person to talk to. And happily, he joins us from San Francisco. Hi, Jesse.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So let's start, if we could, with your big memo that you published an edited version of, talking about what kind of culture you want at your company. The New York Times described it as a culture war stoked from the top. Was that the plan?
This is becoming a trend in the world where a few people don't feel like they can work with anybody unless everyone else adopts their views. And so that's what we're trying to address here, is that we have a few people in the company, very small minority of the company. We're probably talking about 10 people or fewer, who just are going to be offended by everything and just need the rest of the company to follow everything that they want to do.
So this is out of what? You have thousands of employees worldwide.
3,200 or so employees today. You have these a few people that get really upset about something. They manage to affect each, say like 10, 20 people around them who are well-intentioned people who want their coworkers to be comfortable and feel safe at work and not be offended at work. But those people become distracted by the feelings of the small group. And then those people who are distracted, catering to these people, are then not getting their work done. And then it sort of affects another layer of people around them who are just like, we got to do something about this because people aren't getting work done anymore. They might be completely apolitical.
What are the kind of issues? Is it the normal, it's gender and race and the normal kind of hot button issues that they are upset about? Or what are the examples that have gone wrong?
Yeah, it's mostly been DEI, so that's diversity, equity, inclusion related topics. So that's like when and how can we say what our preferred pronouns are? When can we ask other people for their preferred pronouns? Should we have a program of hiring based on particular racial status? Things like that.
And well, while we're on them, what are your answers to those questions? When should your employees share their pronouns? And do you have a program for hiring on racial status?
We don't have a program for hiring on racial status. For the pronouns, we went back and forth on this. We had a lengthy debate on this, which was, another problem we can get into. This was, something that I opened up expecting to have a very rational debate about, a public policy matter. Quickly devolved into, why don't you just respect people? Why don't you just do what people say and, change your speech to conform to whatever requests someone might have, like out of respect?
Is the rule in your company that you cannot share your pronouns, or you're not allowed to have them after your email, or is it just not mandatory, or what's the rule?
When you're interfacing with someone outside of the company, or even a new employee, if you're part of the onboarding process of a new employee, you're not allowed to offer your pronouns. You're not allowed to ask, because we feel like that. We've gotten a lot of feedback, actually, that this is, people see this as extremely anxiety-inducing, maybe discriminatory. People have to wonder if you're asking for their pronouns in a job interview, is that because their job, whether they're going to be accepted, will be determined on whether or not, like, how they identify. So, we got a lot of feedback, people wondering, like, why is your recruiter, why is the interviewer asking me about my gender identity in the interview? Like, is that relevant to this job somehow? And so we prohibited it in that form. And inside the company, you're not allowed to, we're not going to have, like, at the start of every call, 5 minutes to everyone go around and state their pronouns. You can have it in your workplace bio. You can put anything you want in there, and there's no policy enforcing the accommodation of that. So if you ask someone to do it, they don't necessarily have to do it. And if you guys disagree about what your pronouns, which pronouns are going to be used, you have to kind of work it out as adults.
So this is a kind of philosophically interesting one already, isn't it? Because I would say your philosophy as described in the memo is broadly libertarian, or kind of let freedom reign as much as possible. But here you are actually basically mandating against using pronouns, at least in certain contexts. So you've had to intervene. You're not just saying anyone can do what they like.
Yeah, I think we're for freedom of speech when it comes to the U.S. Constitution. Protects the individual against the government. It doesn't protect individuals inside of a private business to be able to say whatever they want anytime they want. So if you go to Disneyland, the guy who's in the Mickey Mouse costume does not get to stop you and tell you what his pronouns are and his personal preferences for turkey legs or whatever. So we take the same position that when you're public facing, when you're interfacing with clients or business partners, you're a customer support agent, you don't get to just reveal a lot of personal preferences about yourself, and you also don't get to ask our clients a bunch of personal sensitive information about them either.
Just touch on that second one that you mentioned briefly in the introduction, which is that in your DEI policy, or whatever your policy is on how to include previously marginalized groups, you don't have a preference towards certain racial groups. You're hiring colorblind. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So we have employees in over 70 countries speaking 50 plus languages. And so, when you get into thinking about how such a policy would be implemented, which country do you start with? If you want to hire minority groups, where in the world do you start? We're hiring from all over the world. It's not just what are minority groups in the United States or, in a particular city in the United States. So I think once you get into a global situation, it becomes, really, really difficult to kind of rank, who's the most, the biggest minority group or the smallest minority group, or who's the most oppressed, And I mean, if you just look at the United States, I don't think anybody in the United States makes like the top 10 of, the world's most oppressed people. So that's just something that, we've chosen to just sort of, in terms of diversity, we really think about it in terms of the diversity of thought that people can bring, the perspectives that they can bring, not checking boxes, on a census form that, to match certain like racial categories.
And is the same true of gender in your organization? You have no interest in what the male-female split is?
We do have an interest in tracking that at a high level, just to see whether or not, we might have some kind of bias in the recruiting process. However, we're not targeting a specific ratio or anything like that.
How is the gender balance at Kraken?
It's about 65-35.
And how does that compare to other crypto or equivalent businesses?
In crypto, I would guess we've got a fairly strong quantity of females relative to males in the company. The industry is very heavily male. However, increasingly, it's attracting more females. But I think this is just a problem in tech broadly, is that it's STEM in general attracts more males.
So this kind of got you into some trouble as well. There was some internal Slack conversation that was leaked to the New York Times discussing women and Bitcoin, or women in programming, or areas that traditionally attract fewer women as a percentage. And then you apparently indicated that maybe you thought that there were open questions there, and that it wasn't necessarily true that women and men are equally interested in the same things. Or what is your actual opinion on that topic, for the record, where we won't spin it in either direction?
Basically, that conversation that they were referring to was essentially about whether men and women think about finances differently or risk taking differently, and whether they would be more likely to just prefer cash over Bitcoin. And that got into like further discussion with people sharing studies and their own anecdotal views and their own, as you might imagine, people from 70 countries, people have very different cultural views about gender. And some cultures even celebrate gender differences. And so it
What's
kind
your
of
view
got
on
like,
it? Do you think that there is a difference there between the sexes, and men are more attracted to riskier options and therefore more attracted to Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies?
yeah, I mean that certainly seems to be the case. Although the level of Bitcoin knowledge, Block did a really great research study recently, and the male to female interest in Bitcoin or knowledge of Bitcoin seems to differ by geography. So it might just be local cultural, familiarity with dealing with money. In the United States, it's way heavy on male knowledge above female knowledge, and I think in the United States in general as well. Like if you look at things like car accidents, like 16-year-olds dying in car accidents is like 95% male, in the United States. So I think there's some evidence to say whether it's nature or nurture that at least in many cultures, men are much more risk taking than women are.
I think probably most people, if you did an opinion poll, would agree with that. Um, do you think the same is true, though, of, as you mentioned it, STEM subjects or computer programming? At that point, it gets more controversial. Do you think that men are more attracted to computer programming as a profession? And do you think that we should try to counterbalance that somehow? Or do you think we should just let it happen? Or
Well, I guess it gets the question of like, what is the ideal balance, or is there something? Is this a societal thing that has caused this gender imbalance in certain roles, or is it something natural that appeals to the the male and female sexes differently? There's just something inherent about it. Like if men are more risk taking naturally, or maybe men like to uh, are like to play with computers more than women. I don't know, for whatever reason, cultural or there's something innate there. I think we should figure that out. I'm a big believer in not trying to get people to do things that are just sort of not not natural to them, or they just don't feel like they would enjoy doing. And if there is in fact a difference between like what men and women broadly enjoy, then I think it might be a mistake to encourage people to go down a career path that they're actually like likely not to enjoy. However, of course, there's exceptions all over, so everyone should make their own individual choice. But I think trying to target a specific ratio, I think as a policy might be flawed. I think we should probably target something more like happiness at work or something like that first.
one final concrete example before we zoom out and look at the bigger picture. You mentioned bodily autonomy in your manifesto or in your work ethic document. And supposedly in the original version that referenced COVID vaccines and how you weren't going to mandate them and you weren't going to have a company policy on that. I think that was excised from the public version, and it just became a reference to vaccines to do with influenza. Is it your view then that whether or not people take a vaccine for COVID or anything else should be an individual choice, and that neither companies nor governments should have a view on it, or where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I think companies, well, a company like ours, which is fully remote, I mean, we have no reason to mandate a vaccine on people. I mean, even for something even more severe than COVID. I think as a society, uh, to mandate a vaccine in the absence of, especially one that seems like it's very experimental so far. We don't have a lot of, long term, obviously, long term studies on the effects of it. And I think to roll out something like that broadly to make it mandatory is just very dangerous, and I think it's immoral to impose such a thing on a population broadly. I think people cannot give informed consent when they don't understand what all the risks are. So, certainly within inside the company, we have no vaccine mandate, and in fact, for corporate retreats, when we do all get together, we do them in places where you can be vaccinated or not, and there's no problem. And we don't ask about your vaccination status, and People can come or not if they're comfortable with that.
So, zooming out a little bit, what is interesting here is that there seems to be a little bit of a trend. I don't know if we have enough data points to say that it is a trend, but certainly Elon Musk is perhaps the most famous example of a libertarian leaning or someone who is happy to stick two fingers up at whatever the kind of high status progressive establishment view is on certain topics. He has even said that he will be supporting the Republicans or describes himself as Republican. So he, even beyond people like Peter Thiel, is a more mainstream figure who now seems to break with what we think of as a kind of left-leaning orthodoxy within technology. Silicon Valley, San Francisco, Democratic Party has very deep ties with some of the big technology giants. Do you think something is changing, or how would you describe it? Is this a breakaway faction within Silicon Valley that you now find yourself part of, or what's the truth of it?
Yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, Silicon Valley definitely is very left leaning. I think that there's been a bit of a pushback recently because I feel like um, the demands have kind of gone too far. It's sort of become uh, there's this contingent of people who basically, if you don't agree with them, you're evil, you're a Nazi, and you must be destroyed at all costs. And these people inside of these companies, become a cancer, and that spreads to other people. And so I think that there's starting to be some pushback because of the extremeness of the views that are there, and just the intolerance of other perspectives. So I think business leaders have had enough of it, and I think they're seeing like what problems it creates inside their companies, and that most people really just want to do good work and not be bothered at work. And this small group of people that are really ideologically motivated and intolerant of other views are just dragging everybody down. And so I think they're starting to push back. And I think there's Nicholas Taleb, I think in one of his books, says something along the lines of, the loudest voice wins, basically. The most outraged, minority wins in a battle, because, if you're just sort of unwilling to concede anything, and you're willing to be outraged and you're willing to drag everybody down with you, then people tend to cave to that. And so that has been seen as a successful strategy. And I think if you don't get those people out of your company, they will drag everyone else down with them. And I think they're now being removed from companies quite broadly.
What's interesting about the kind of document you produced is that it is quite a political document. You say overtly that Kraken should be involved in politics. People should expect you to lobby the government for certain things. Your view you describe as libertarian or classically liberal or various terms like that. And that is the house view of the company. So there is a certain politics innate to the mission of your company. Do you think that's fair? That actually, if you have this big mission, which is to drive crypto forward and to help what you see as a revolution in finance, that is attached to a certain political worldview, which makes you a political actor.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the libertarian view is sort of the most neutral view. I mean, the view is basically minimal government interference, let people do as they may, let the free market sort itself out, let people help each other voluntarily. So I feel like that's sort of the most neutral view. And yeah, I guess it makes us, by taking what I view as that more neutral view, I guess we're not picking a side, either left or right or whatever. We're not aligned to any particular political party. It's sort of, just our view is like, our right to, it's very, very much informed by the United States Constitution, and the rights that come with that. And, it is taking a stand and saying, you know, we have we have a mission as a company. That mission involves obtaining alignment and support with politicians around the world. And yeah, we may donate to some of those politicians, and some of those politicians may have views on things, positions on things that are bad, that maybe I personally don't like, but maybe they're really pro crypto and we really need them. And crypto is the bigger mission. I feel like if we can deliver a global currency and a global store of value like Bitcoin to the world, we will be able to undo a lot of damage that the government has done. So that's mission number one, and that's kind of the primary thing we look at when making donations to politicians.
I guess realistically, in an American context, the Republicans are more aligned with the libertarian worldview, at least most of them, than the Democrats. The people who are going to be about cutting red tape for crypto are going to be found within the Republican Party. So I've got to ask, do you think that makes you a Republican? Elon Musk has said he is. What about you?
No, it definitely doesn't make me Republican. I think, the Republicans, I think, are more closely aligned with smaller government, at least historically, and cutting red tape and supporting American business and American competitiveness. However, they certainly seem to have a lot of other things going on with their platform that, company completely ignore, that I don't personally align with. So, as you say, they have been probably more so our allies in Washington than the Democrats. However, we want to work with everybody, and I'm personally donating as well to politicians on both sides of the aisle. Anyone who says that they're in support of Bitcoin and are doing things in support of Bitcoin is who will support.
We should expect most Kraken donations to be in the direction of the Republicans in the short term.
Until the Democrats come around, it'll probably be imbalanced. Yeah, so hopefully that's some incentive for Democrats to take up a positive view of crypto and support the industry.
So let's get on to this bigger mission of yours then, because Bitcoin has crashed really very seriously in the past days and weeks. Prices were under $20,000 as recently as yesterday. It was above 60,000 or even up to 70,000 not so many months ago. For many people who have taken a punt or even put large chunks of their life savings into Bitcoin, this is a very devastating situation. What's your reaction to it? Does it spell the end? Is it something that we should be very troubled about to do with the whole crypto movement?
The last time Bitcoin was in this range of $18,000 to $20,000 was like December of 2020. So I mean, we're not even talking about like that long ago. I mean, it had an incredible run over the last 2 years, and I think we're just sort of back on trend now. And I don't think it's anything to be worried about. This has happened several times. You look at these charts. It's like Bitcoin dies, every 4 years, and then it just keeps coming back. So I think if you invest in Bitcoin, I always tell people, can you hold it? Hold it for at least 5 years. If you can hold it for at least 5 years, then don't worry about it. If you're thinking about like paying your rent next week, then it's probably not the best place to store your money as a store of value, because the volatility could be 50%. It could move 50% in either direction in the matter of a week. So don't use your pocket money to buy Bitcoin, but if you can hold it for 5+ years, the chart looks really good for that kind of time frame.
And do you think this is the dip? I mean, are you buying more now? Do you think it's upwards from here?
Yeah, I just bought. I said I was going to buy when it got to $20,000, and I was asleep when that happened, so I woke up and bought it at 18.2. So yeah, so I'm all in now. I spent all the available money that I had, and now I'm fully long Bitcoin, and looks like I'm already up about 10% today.
There's even countries that have really invested in Bitcoin. And a lot of the critics will say that crashes like this do undermine its claim to be a store of value that is a reasonable place to put even long-term savings if it can lose 90% or 50% at such short term. Your argument to them is basically premised on the fact that long-term it's going to carry on going up. Is that right? That you're saying this is, yes, it's volatile, but you still think overall the trend will be upwards?
The fundamentals of Bitcoin keep getting better, and I don't see any reason to not find it even more attractive as time goes on, especially if you can hold it long term.
So, including in your company document, you say it's time to think about taking more of your paycheck in Bitcoin because the fundamentals have only improved. You stand by that? even now?
Absolutely. Yeah. I just bought a lot of Bitcoin the other day because I felt like it was dramatically underpriced.
So here is the thing which I'm deeply interested in your answer to, because it's something I haven't quite understood, which is that the philosophy behind Bitcoin is a kind of libertarian one, as you have described it. It's about reducing the power of governments to interfere in your personal affairs, to liberate currencies from the interference of policymakers. And a lot of the rhetoric is about being for the little guy, people in developing countries that don't have access to good currency, or poorer people. And yet, large portions, maybe even the majority of Bitcoins, are owned by very wealthy individuals. And it seems practically to be more of a kind of way to move money around easily by very wealthy people who find democratic governments kind of inconvenient. And they want to continue with their international globalist lifestyle. So that to me is a bit of a contradiction. The Bitcoiners are presenting themselves as populists on the one hand, being for the little guy, and yet the reality is it's a lot of rich people making a lot of money, and probably the less sophisticated retail investors who put their savings in and out of Bitcoin, maybe at the wrong times, are not really winning from it. Tell me why I'm wrong.
You're right that the Wall Street has entered the market in a substantial way. There are a lot of hedge funds trading Bitcoin, and funds like MicroStrategy is holding a lot of Bitcoin. El Salvador itself, as a country, is holding Bitcoin. So there are definitely some people with deep pockets holding some Bitcoin as part of their portfolio. But I think the fundamental differentiator of Bitcoin is that it's actually accessible to everybody. Yes, it's kind of there are a few people that own a lot of it, but that goes for the stock market, and it goes for gold, and it goes for just about anything else, real estate. There's a concentration of wealth just in the world, and wealthy people tend to own more of stuff. But the great thing about Bitcoin is that there's nothing that can prevent anyone else from owning it. Anyone can join the network at any time, and there's not a bank or a regulator or someone in the way saying, "Wait a minute, you're not allowed to own Bitcoin. You're not allowed to spend your Bitcoin." So there's nothing that can stop you, which is the fundamental difference between the crypto system and the legacy system, which is sort of a fully permissioned system where you need the approval of some authority to participate in the network.
It isn't, I guess the flip side to the argument is that those democratically elected governments, which are attached to countries, are the defenders of the little guy. At least that's the theory, that, by having a vote, you have some control over the world you live in. And if money is totally detached from countries and it just moves freely around, there'll be no accountability. And actually, the little guy will have even less power because it will just be this international elite moving their money around and doing whatever they like. There's no stop to that power at that point.
Well, I think the elite are already doing that. I don't know why Bitcoin is different. The current system leaves over, up close to 2 billion people out in the cold entirely. They have no access to financial services, period. So, they're dealing with like cash under the mattress, and they have no digital form of payment. They have no way to interface with, Amazon or buy things online. They might have to use payday advance services or check cashing services, which charge them 20%. They might be using Western Union to send remittances internationally, which might charge them 20% or some really high minimum fee.
Final question on this. It would seem to me that most populist voters, people who are electing in these governments that are trying to sort of resist the establishment that's been there for 30 years, do not tend to be libertarians. Most of the populist governments being elected, not just the one of Donald Trump, but around the world, have quite a lot of big government programs attached to them. They're about reducing globalization, about putting up boundaries and borders, about using the power of government to protect people from this globalized world. And yet Bitcoin seems to be on the opposite side of that ledger. It seems to be something that enhances the globalized world, and therefore it's a sort of anti-populist project. That's what I'm struggling to get past. And tell me, how do you see that?
I think taking away the power of money from the government, while every government could still have their own currency, it would just be competing in a marketplace of currencies with Bitcoin and with other cryptocurrencies and with anything else. And I think you leave it up to the choice of the people to decide which currency they're going to use. I think most people would choose to use a currency like Bitcoin. I mean, especially if you're someone who's traveling a lot. I have, I don't know, stacks of like random currencies from traveling around the world that like I just never traded back in. And it would eliminate that kind of a problem of having to convert currencies frequently when you're moving between markets. And I mean, this is how some businesses make all their money, is just these exchange rates. And I think if you can reduce fees, reduce the time it takes to make a transaction, eliminate the friction in a transaction, you create a much more inclusive world for people. And also, I think governments have shown that they're not capable of properly managing a currency. I mean, just look at the inflation in the United States now, and look at the death of many countries due to hyperinflation of their local currency. And so I think people have lost a lot of trust in government's ability to manage a currency, and I think they would prefer something that is global and not run by a few people, making decisions for the whole country.
Although if I'd taken my money out for my holiday 2 weeks ago in Bitcoin, it would be worth a lot less than it was then. I guess that's it's quite a bit major hurdle to clear.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the volatility will go down over time as more of the world comes on to the Bitcoin platform and there's more liquidity. Again, I certainly would not say like, don't put money you're planning on spending in the next 2 weeks. Take a percentage of, if you have an investment portfolio that's stocks and commodities and a bunch of other stuff, maybe put 10% of it in Bitcoin, maybe put 20%, but definitely don't think of it like you're going to want to sell it again in a few weeks. Think of it like you're going to hold it for a few years at least.
Let me ask you to sum up, looking at the situation in Silicon Valley and in the kind of world of technology and crypto that you inhabit. Do you think we're at a change moment? Do you think Elon Musk, yourself, other people speaking really openly and clearly about these kind of issues is part of this important change, and that the atmosphere is going to be different from now on?
You're referring to kind of like the woke environment or the politicization of the workplace. Yeah, I think that the pendulum is starting to swing back the other way, and I think there's some pushback against people kind of attempting to commandeer the company for their own mission, at odds with the mission of the company. And I think that people are seeing that you can push back now. I think for a while there was a fear that you would be canceled, and this is still a fear, I'm sure, for many, that if you push back against this woke agenda, that you will be canceled somehow. You'll be dragged in the media, and I mean, just as we saw with the New York Times hit piece, the media is more than ready to cancel people for pushing back against this extremist agenda. So I think you have to be prepared and ready to deal with that. But I think, from our perspective, it's worth it. And the response to our culture document and our commitment to our culture and taking a stand on this has been overwhelmingly positive. And in fact, we've seen a big uptick in the number of job applications just in the last week as well.
So you haven't been burnt by the last few days. We might be hearing more from you in the future.
It's never good to have a negative piece come out about you. There's also starting to be some backlash on the media as well. I think people are tired of this cancel culture, and they're tired of these hit pieces. And I think they just want honest journalism back.
Maybe a career in politics after this, Jesse. Would you consider it?
Probably not, because I like to be able to do what I want, and I think I would be incredibly infuriated by the bureaucracy of trying to do the right thing, but not being able to get a bunch of other politicians on board with me.
That sounded like a non-100% denial. I'm going to take that as a glimpse of possibility.
It's possible. Anything could happen. Who knows?
Jesse, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thanks for having me.
That was Jesse Powell, the founder and CEO of Kraken, the crypto platform. He was making a couple of predictions there. Number one, I'd say, is that there's some kind of sea change afoot in tech in Silicon Valley, pushing back at some of these, what he described as woke ideas, or progressive ideas that you couldn't speak out against. And alongside Elon Musk, we've been seeing some quite powerful voices taking a different view. So it will be interesting to see whether more of that happens in the near future. The other prediction, of course, was that Bitcoin, which is the biggest of the cryptocurrencies and the central part of his own company, has now passed its lows and will be increasing in coming days and weeks. He said that he's actually invested a big chunk of his own money just a couple of days ago. So that is a very easy prediction to track, and I look forward to seeing whether he's right. Thanks for tuning in. This was UnHerd.